everyone, and welcome back to Murder, Lies, and Everything in Between, a true crime podcast with me, Jess, and my husband, Atty.
Hello.
Hope you're all good this week. We've had an alright week. Atty's not very well. You might be able to hear, you might not be able to hear, but he's a bit poorly, aren't you, babe?
I am dying, not poorly. I am got the man flu.
Why is it when men have the flu, they think they're absolutely fucking dying
Because
of
I
like
am.
the plague?
I need medical attention. You ain't taking it seriously. So someone out there might.
Please all have sympathy for him, because I have a little bit of sympathy, but I'm not the most sympathetic of people, because when I'm poorly, I still have to go around and do everything, and I still have to be working. But why is it when men are poorly, excuse me, men, everything stops? Everything just stops.
Because we have a harder time dealing with things.
Oh, but didn't they do a study that like man flu like is significantly worse than other things? They did a study a few years back.
Oh, there you go then.
Yeah.
So we are getting it bad then.
Or it's just that you're wimps.
No.
So jumping straight into today's case, this is, I think it's quite a well-known case. And I'm just going to say from the beginning, I will say it at the end, this case, they actually made a movie on it. So very loosely based on it, but there was a movie, a very, very, very well-known movie. People around our age groups are kind of like, I would say early 30s, 40s, maybe even 50s might even know this movie because it's a proper cult classic. The people that know this case will know exactly what movie I'm talking about. So today we are jumping into the Gainesville Ripper case, also known as Danny Rowling. So the sources I used, for today's case was Court TV, Wikipedia, All That's Interesting, and biography.com for today's case. So Danny Rowling was born in Shreveport, Louisiana on May the 26th, 1954, to James and Claudia Rowling. His dad was a police lieutenant. From what I could actually find out, his mother was a stay-at-home mum. So she didn't seem to have a job or anything like that. She was kind of like a stay-at-home mum. When Claudia told James she was pregnant, he wasn't happy. He didn't want to have children. And they'd actually only been married for 2 weeks at this point when she fell pregnant. She was only 19 years old. So she was kind of like a baby herself. You know, she was quite young when they got married.
Don't waste no time then.
No, not at all, no. Danny was just 1 when his father started to abuse him for the first time. And on one particular occasion, he was beaten because he wasn't crawling properly as a baby.
He wasn't crawling properly?
He wasn't crawling properly.
Why, is there a special way you got to crawl, is there?
Well, according to James, there was a way and he wasn't doing it. When Kevin, Danny's younger brother, was born in 1955, the abuse unfortunately only got worse. And according to Claudia's accounts, Danny endured physical abuse at least once or twice a week at his dad's hands. But the verbal abuse was daily. James would kind of tell Danny that he was unwanted or he was just an embarrassment. Not only were the children not allowed to have birthdays or holidays, but they never even got any affectionate word or any kind of affectionate action from their dad in the slightest. So you could just tell that he didn't want them. And even when they were born, you know, even if the child's unwanted, you would hope that the dad would kind of fall into the role of being a dad.
Yeah.
And he just didn't. He didn't soften up, which a lot of men tend to do when they kind of find out they're having a baby. He didn't soften up at all, and he just kind of stayed hard-faced and cold. He would regularly beat Danny, Claudia, and his brother Kevin for breathing in a way that he didn't like. So it was completely extreme, kind of how much he could. Clearly, all of them just pissed him off. Clearly, anything that they did. Claudia made repeated attempts to leave her husband, but always ended up returning to the home and back to James. I know we've spoke about this previously, haven't we, about like domestic abuse cases.
And they always go back. And I don't understand why.
Yeah, she did the same. But I know I said it previously that they actually did a study, and it was like a certain amount of times that people statistically leave before they actually leave permanently.
But we said, like, we don't know why do they keep going back? If you had your chance to leave and you've left, and then whether it's a week, month, whatever, you decide to go back to them. Yeah, I can't feel sorry for that person, he or she.
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, the good this is completely no aspect into the case at all, but she did end up separating from him like like when Danny was way older, like a full-on adult.
Yeah.
And they did end up actually separating. So she did end up breaking away from him, but I mean, it took probably like fucking 30-40 years. At one point, Danny had a pet dog who he absolutely adored. I'll just give you a trigger warning now because we're dog lovers. I'll put it in the show notes anyway. But James felt that it was kind of okay to beat the shit out of this dog so much and so regularly that the dog actually died in Danny's arms after one particularly bad beating. And Danny was only 5 years old when this happened. And the dog died in his arms. Oh, fucking horrific, isn't it?
Just wrong, isn't it?
When Danny failed the 3rd grade for far too many absences due to kind of illnesses and stuff like that, his mother had a nervous breakdown, and Danny's school counsellors described him as, in quotes, suffering from an inferiority complex, which I can totally understand being brought up in that situation, with aggressive tendencies and poor impulse control. So I know we've spoke about this again before, about the frontal lobe developing. It's proven statistically in studies and stuff that if you receive damage to the frontal lobe before it's actually developed, and I think it's like when you're a teenager, like a later teenager, that actually develops fully. If you receive trauma to that area, that is the part of the brain that actually like helps you with impulse control and stuff. And this is why damage to it, a lot of it causes these people to have like aggressive tendencies and stuff like that. So that does kind of cover what we spoke about. I mean, if he was getting the shit beaten out of him from when he was a child, of course he's going to have some kind of damage and some kind of trauma to that. At 11, Danny started playing guitar and sang hymn-like songs. And at this time, his mother was committed to a hospital after a failed suicide attempt. Danny then started to drink quite heavily and do drugs, presumably to deal with his home life. At 14, he was caught peeping into a girl's room by her parents. As you can imagine, his dad beat the absolute shit out of him for this. After this, though, he did try to kind of like hold down a job. He attended church regularly until he was old enough to enlist in the forces. In the meantime, though, he also tried to commit suicide. He dropped out of high school, and then at this point, he was old enough to enlist in the Air Force after he was denied entry into the Navy. So he wasn't allowed to go into the Navy. Danny's service, though, didn't last for very long as he was caught with drugs and he was still heavily drinking, as we kind of spoke about previously. So they discharged him. So he didn't have a very, very long service at all. I heard as well in one source that he stole a bike or something. Like, I'm not sure what bike, but he stole a bike, and that's also another reason he was discharged. So
right, okay.
He was just basically just a shit service person.
What was he doing in the service? Does it say?
I'm not sure. It just said that he was in the Navy.
Right, okay.
He wanted to go in the Navy, but he went into the Air Force. Pretty much sure it said. It didn't elaborate much else on it. He then returned home to Shreveport after this, which was weird because he wanted to escape Shreveport.
Right.
So that was a bit weird. When he got home, he met a woman. I haven't wrote her name down because it's irrelevant to this case in the slightest. They started to date and they later went on to marry, and they actually had a baby girl together. Unfortunately, his drinking was still completely out of control. He was just a fucking terrible husband. And after a final incident in which he threatened to kill her and shoot her, might just add, she filed for divorce after just 3 years of marriage. So not a very long marriage. I'll just say now that we don't hit anything about his child after this. Okay. There's not anything about his child anywhere, really. Between 1979 and 1993, Danny managed to amass 12 felony convictions over a space of 15 years in 6 jurisdictions, ranging from armed robbery to aggravated assault on a police officer. He was in and out of prison during these years, and he just drifted around the country hitchhiking. So that's pretty much all he did. Just stealing, pretty much, just burglarizing, just basically just being a shit human being. We can't be sure about the places he moved around to. Drifters are so hard to pin down. So we do know, though, what he did and where he was from 1989 onwards. Okay? He was in and out of jobs, and after one particular occasion, on the 4th of November 1989, he was actually sacked from a fast food restaurant. Apparently, this made him, though, lose his absolute mind, because this was when he went on to commit his first murders in Shreveport.
All because he got sacked from a job.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke about before that he's got poor impulse control, so anything will tip him over the edge.
Yeah.
And this clearly was the final thing that just tipped him over that edge. He actually saw Julie Grissom at a mall where she was working. He spied on her and he followed her all the way home. At this point, he actually broke into her home. He raped her, stabbed her to death. Her dad, Tom, that was also in the house, and her 8-year-old son, Sean. He posed Julie's body with her legs wide open. He cleaned her body as well. She'd been restrained by her wrists, so she had like tape residue around her wrists,
Right.
and she had severe bite marks to her boobs.
Where was the dad? You said the dad was in the house.
The dad was in the house, yeah.
And you didn't hear none of this.
Well, no, he was killed.
Oh, right, okay.
So she was raped.
Yeah.
She was followed home. Obviously, she was the intended victim of this.
Yeah.
And he obviously raped her. We don't know in what order this all happened. It's irrelevant why, but this murders, they don't get found out until way later on. They didn't realise that Danny was actually responsible for these.
Right, okay.
All right. These were unsolved, in quotes. In May 1990, Danny had an argument with his dad, and he finally snapped on him, and he shot his 58-year-old dad in the stomach and in the head, nearly killing him. He did survive, though, but James lost an eye and an ear to the crime. I mean, I hate to say karma. I mean, I'm not condoning any type of violence, but karma at some point.
Well, it soon comes around, doesn't it?
100%. Danny then went and changed his name. He stole some papers from breaking into someone's house, so he assumed their name. And he fled Shreveport and took a bus to Sarasota, Florida. He went to start a new life under the name and alias Michael Kennedy. And this was in July of 1990. While in Sarasota, he purchased a K-bar knife at an Army/Navy store, which cost him the handsome sum of $34. On another day, he went and purchased a 9mm pistol under that same assumed identity, Michael Kennedy, his alias. He then, at this point, after purchasing these things, he then went to Gainesville, where he would just absolutely destroy the calm tranquility of this small university town. So the crime rates in this university town in Gainesville were so low. From what I saw, it was like, I think it was like named like the best place to live or something like that, like university town before all this shit happened.
Right.
On August the 18th of the same year, he checked into a travel lodge, but he also went and set up a camp in a nearby wooded area. We don't know why he went and did this. It doesn't make any sense why you would check into a hotel plus go in and set up like a camp in the woods. Bit weird.
Yeah.
And there's no explanation to this either, why he did this. It was really fucking weird. Around this time, he visited a Walmart. So for us, it's like an Asda.
Yeah.
A Walmart is, yeah. He purchased a tent and a mattress, but he stole a screwdriver, duct tape, and 2 pairs of athletic gloves. But when he was at this Walmart, he spotted 2 potential victims in Sonia Larson and Christina Powell. They were actually shopping to furnish their new apartment that they'd rented at the start of kind of like university/college. University to us, college in the States. Sonia was 18 and Christina was only 17. So they were babies still, just going out and kind of on their own, just starting a new life at college. He went to follow them home to their apartment, where he watched them for a little while, but he actually got scared off by someone walking near. So he left that apartment complex and he made his way to another apartment complex, but again, he was scared off, but this time by a security guard. So he had a couple of attempts at this point. At 3 a.m. on the night of the 24th of August, he went back to that first apartment, of
the 2 girls.
Of the 2 girls, He went back to that first apartment at the Williamsburg complex, apartment 113, where Sonia and Christina was living, that he'd been spying on before. He went to the back door, donning all black clothes and a black ski mask. He pried the door open with a stolen screwdriver and he saw Christina sleeping downstairs on the sofa. He watched her for a short time. She didn't wake up, but decided to go for the other girl first. He'd already decided what he was going to do, who he was going to rape and who he was going to kill. Yeah. He'd already made this decision up. I think even before he even went into the house when he was spying on him, he made that decision. So he made his way upstairs to the other girl. Danny walked upstairs to find Sonia fast asleep in her bed. Before she could even scream, he stabbed her and slammed tape over her mouth to muffle her screams. She fought, and she fought fucking hard. We know this because of all the defensive wounds that are all over her hands. He stabbed her several more times, and he stood there and watched her die and bleed to death. He walked back downstairs to see Christina was still sleeping. She didn't hear anything. He taped her hands behind her back and he tapes her mouth. He then cut her clothes off, he cuts her bra off, and then he forces her to give him a blowjob.
I'll bite it off.
So I know you were going to say this, so I added this in as a note at the end.
100%. Someone putting dick in my mouth, that's it, you're getting it, mate.
So she was terrified, and they made a point of saying this, that she was so terrified, she hoped that if she just did what he said, that he wouldn't kill her, and that's why she didn't do anything.
Oh, mate.
I know we've had this conversation before, and I said, what would you do if you were in prison and being forced to? You were like, I'd bite that shit off.
Yeah. I would, 100% would. And I think people will agree, I'm telling you. You fucking be like, yeah, okay, I'll go down on you. You see what happens. I'm going to bite it off, man. I ain't letting go either. I'd quit balls off. You won't be doing it again, will you? You know what I mean?
I'll have a nubbin.
Shit. A little nubbin for a penis. They're going to have to fucking sew it back. I ain't going to sew it back on. I'm going to chew it.
Yeah.
You have no penis left.
Thing is, I think she was so blessed and she was so fucking terrified that she just hoped that he would just rape her and just kind of leave. Obviously, she doesn't know that her flatmate's been killed at this point. He proceeded to rape her, and when he was finished, he turned her over, pushed her to the ground, and he stabbed her in the back until she was dead.
Oh, yeah.
This was actually his MO, though. So he always stabbed people in the back. That's pretty much what he always did. He was just a coward. He never would look them in the eye. He would never look them in the eye. He always turned them over so he didn't have to look at them in the fucking eyes when he killed them. After he did this, he untaped her. He ate an apple and a banana out of the fridge, and he walked back upstairs and proceeds to rape the dead Sonia. So he commits necrophilia on Sonia's body. Danny washed both of the girls' body in dishwashing liquid and vinegar, and he douched out their vaginas in an attempt to remove his DNA. You know what douching is, don't you? If you don't know what douching is, it's basically like a squeezy funnel, isn't it? It's basically it's used in like medical things.
I just think it's funny how you're trying to just describe this.
It's used in medical things to basically help with people that can't shit, pretty much. So he did this in their vaginas to try and remove any DNA. He posed Sonia's body in a sexually explicit way, like he did with the Grissom body, and he went back to Christina's body. He posed her so that when you opened the door, it would be the first thing that you saw. He cut off her nipples. And don't laugh at that, eh? And I know why you're... this is not fucking funny in the slightest.
It's a personal joke, isn't it?
It's an inside joke about cutting off nipples. It's not abuse, by the way. I'm just going to tell you now. Right?
It is an inside joke, but it's too long to explain.
Yeah, it is.
Right?
So he removed the nipples and then he took them away with him as a trophy. He then showered at the apartment and then left. It was said by Danny later on that when Christina screamed in pain, he said, quote, "Take the pain, bitch, take the pain." The next day, the apartment manager tried to contact the girls afterwards, as one of the girls' parents was actually getting really worried that they couldn't contact them. So this wasn't normal for them in the slightest to be uncontactable. He called the police who attended the scene and broke into the property because the manager's keys wouldn't unlock the door. They think because he fucked with the lock so much, that's why it wouldn't unlock, because he used that screwdriver, didn't he? When they obviously got in, the police saw the grisly scene left by Danny Rowling, so posed in that sexually explicit way. The following day, on the 25th of August, Krista Hoyt, it's really hard because one's called Christina, one's called Krista, okay, so I'm sorry if I mix them up on occasion. She was a student at the university. The landlord of her noticed that the lock on her back gate was unlatched, and when he checked with her at 5 p.m. that evening as to why it was unlocked, she said that she did see a TV guy that was over to do some work and that he must have left it unlatched. So he told her, look, can you just make sure that it's locked in the future? Because this was actually the access to her back garden.
Right.
So this, it's like ours being unlatched. It's a safety issue because it's main access to her back garden. So he locked the gate. Okay, but Danny had already found his next victim in Krista. And surprise, surprise, it wasn't the TV guy who left the gate unlocked. It was Danny for coming back later on. So he'd already pinned her down at this point. At 9 p.m, he went back to the apartment. He broke in with the screwdriver via the rear bedroom door. He walked into the apartment and went to the front door, where he saw that there was a bookcase next to it. There was kind of like an alcove next to it, which he could hide behind without being seen from the front door. So what he decided to do, I don't know why he did this, but he decided to take all the shit off the bookcase, put it in a pillowcase, and then move the bookcase to the bedroom.
Right.
I don't know why. It seems a bit of a weird thing to do, but he's a bit of a weird character. He then went back to the front door to wait in that alcove to wait for Christina to get home. For Krista to get home. Krista was actually with a friend playing racquetball that evening. They finished racquetball at about 9 p.m, so when Danny was breaking into her flat. And they went back to his house to have a drink and kind of have a chat with his parents. At about 9:45, she left his house and returned home. She parked in her normal parking space and walked up to her apartment. Normal evening for her. As soon as she opened the door, Danny attacked her from behind and got her in a chokehold and pulled her to the ground. She didn't have any opportunity to get away from him at this point.
Right.
He, again, like the others, taped her hands in her mouth and then he carried her to her room. He laid her on the bed and cut off her clothes. I don't know any other way to put this. I rewrote this multiple times, but I can't find any appropriate way to put it, so I'll just be really plain. He inserted his fingers into her vagina, did whatever he was doing for a little while, and then he noticed that she was actually on her period.
Right.
So he pulled out her tampon and threw it in the corner of the room.
Didn't you see the tampon before he started doing his thing?
I mean, I assume not.
How you not see it?
I know how.
It's a dangly thing.
Yeah, I know.
Dangly thing hanging out.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. But he was playing with her for a little while, he said,
Right.
before he realised that she was on a period. During the whole attack, he told her exactly what he was going to do to her. He raped her, and then he turned her over, and like all the others, he stabbed her in the back repeatedly. But this time, he stabbed her directly in the heart, severing her aorta valve in her heart and killing her. He then turned her back over and cut her stomach open from her pubic bone to her breastbone. He removed her nipples, like he did with the other one, but he actually placed them beside her. He then left the scene to go back to his campsite. But when he got back to his campsite, he realised that he'd actually lost his wallet and he couldn't find his wallet anywhere. So fearing he'd kind of left it at the scene, he returned to her apartment, but he couldn't find it anywhere. But he was not willing to miss an opportunity, and he'd started to see that rigor mortis had started to set in on Krista's body. So he decided to repose her body. But that wasn't all. He then decided that he was going to decapitate her, and he placed her head on a bookshelf. As rigor mortis had already set in, he then sat her in the upright position on the edge of the bed. Posed
with no head?
Yeah.
With no head and nipples?
Yeah, with her legs wide open, just to cause as much horror and shock as he could to the person that had discovered her. Danny went on, after he'd left the scene, he went on to phone from a payphone, 911, to report his wallet is missing under his alias name. As the murders were circulating, students were terrified that they could be next. So they slept in groups, they had male friends sleep over. Obviously, all these things so far, they've only happened to women.
Right.
So they're all like, oh, well, if we have a man here with us, he's not going to attack because it's a man. He's not attacked a man. He's only attacked a woman. They obviously don't know about the Grissom family yet at this
Right.
point. And this actually was happening in the early, like, fall semester. So students actually were withdrawing from their enrolment, or they were transferring to other colleges to get away from the crimes. Lots of people actually left at this point.
Fair enough, though, wouldn't you? Though, do you know what I mean?
100%,
After 2
yeah.
massacres.
Yeah, well, yeah, after how absolutely vile and just severe they were, you'd be like, oh, fuck this, I'm not
That's it.
doing this, wouldn't
If
you?
you don't feel safe around your surroundings, you'll be like, oh, I'm off. I'll see you later.
Yeah, 100%, yeah. One of the students who were terrified of these crimes was a girl called Tracy Pauls. She was actually glad, though, because she was living with her friend Manny Taboda. Tracy spoke to her friend on the phone on the 26th of August about the other murders and the fears that she had about them. But she said that she had a man living with her and the other murders were all women, so she hoped that she'd be okay. On Monday, August 27th at 3 a.m, Danny broke into their apartment by prying open the sliding glass door and popping the pin out. He checked to see if there were any witnesses apart from the female that he knew was there, and he actually came across Manny, who was obviously living there. Manny woke up and him and Manny fought. He didn't realise, though, that Manny was quite a large man. He was a high school football player.
Right.
So he wasn't a small person.
No.
He did not expect this, and Manny fought fucking hard. He had so many defensive wounds, but eventually Danny did manage to overpower him, but only after stabbing him 30 times.
Right.
He was, from what kind of evidence and during the investigation and stuff, he was stabbed multiple times where he was still fighting. He had to get those 30 stab wounds in to even just
Slow him down.
Yeah, basically, because he was fighting.
Did Manny die?
Manny did die,
Right.
yeah. 30 stab wounds, yeah. As this was all happening, though, Tracy heard the commotion and come out of her bedroom. As this happened, she walked into the corridor with a curling tongue in her hand. She obviously tried to pick up any weapon she could, not thinking this was happening. I can just imagine the fear like she must have been feeling. She used this to try and defend herself. They locked eyes. She ran into her bedroom to try and barricade herself in.
Right.
Danny, though, managed to break through the door and kick the door down. She said to him, quote, "You're the one, aren't you?" He said, "Yeah, I'm the one." He taped Tracy's hands and her mouth, and then he threw her on the bed. He then, like the previous girl, he inserted his fingers into her vagina and he cut her t-shirt off. Danny then anally sodomized her, turned her back over, and then stabbed her repeatedly until she died. He then cleaned her body with dishwashing liquid as the previous victims and vinegar to try and kill anything, and then again douched out her vagina to try and get rid of any DNA. He dragged her into the hallway and then he posed her just like the others, but he didn't actually mutilate her body or Manny's body. Manny he just left there. He killed him and then he just left him in the room. He didn't do anything to his body. It's actually thought he was worried that he would kind of be caught and found out. So he thought that, oh shit, I haven't really got the time and I might get caught, so I'm not going to risk it at this point. That same day, a deputy was patrolling the area. So you remember, this is early hours of the morning. So later on that night, way later on in the day, a deputy was patrolling the area when he saw two men late at night. He decided to just kind of wait and see what they were doing because they were kind of acting a little bit suspicious. It was late at night. I'll just kind of look and see what they're doing. He was doing his job, basically. And he saw them actually jump off the ledge and into the woods. These, though, were the same woods that Danny Rowland was camping in. So the deputy called for backup because obviously it's a bit weird that you've got these people walking into the woods in the dead of night. He saw the two men walk into a clearing. When he called out to them, one man stopped, but the other one carried on walking.
Right.
So they called for canine backup to come and track kind of where they were going and what was kind of going on. At this point, they actually came across Danny's tents and they saw dye-stained money. This will make sense in a minute. They saw dye-stained money that looked like it had come from a bank robbery. Funnily enough, that same day, there was actually a bank robbery that they knew they were onto something at this point. They checked the tent out and they found a screwdriver, dark clothing, a 9mm gun, and a tape recording of Danny with his fingerprints on. They obviously didn't know at this point, though, it was him. They just found a tape recording.
So who was the two men that they was following originally? Were just
people,
two random, right? Okay,
two random strangers. They were nothing to do with Danny. Right. What a fluke!
So it's just happened to see these two men and then stumbled on the campsite, right?
What a fucking chance, of that happening. So, like, the chances of that happening,
pure dumb luck, basically.
Or no luck for Danny. The following day, they did a grid search of the area and they found a loosely buried bag with dyed money in and a ski mask. This was Danny's mask that he'd used at the scenes of the murders, so the mask that he'd used. Law enforcement initially had a few leads and they did actually identify two suspects. One suspect was Edward Lewis Humphrey, a University of Florida student who had a history of mental illness. Humphrey was arrested and after a physical altercation with his grandmother, and he was held in custody for 5 months. So he had a fight with his grandmother and she dropped the charges and they went, now we're going to pin the murders on you. This random guy, just because it was an opportunity. The police at this point, you got to remember, they were put under a lot of pressure to get this murderer because everyone was fucking terrified of what was going on in the area.
Yeah.
So they wanted to pin anyone down for it. And at this point, the murders had stopped because Danny hadn't committed any more murders at this point. But thankfully, a grand jury refused to indict him on the murder charges, citing that there was insufficient evidence. So, Humphrey's photo was shown repeatedly by media. So his picture was circulated everywhere and everyone thought that he was the one that had done this. So he was basically guilty by public conviction, pretty much.
Yeah.
People thought he was guilty. But authorities did publicly clear him of all charges after Danny Rowling was arrested. And there was another suspect, but all we know is that he was also cleared. So that's all we know about that.
Right, okay.
Okay? They didn't give a name or anything like that. So they mustn't have had a lot on him. Louisiana police alerted Florida authorities to an unsolved triple murder in Shreveport on November the 4th, 1989. The first murders, the Grissom murders we spoke about. Detectives noted that there were really dodgy similarities between them and the Gainsville murders and those of 55-year-old William Grissom, his 24-year-old daughter Julie, and his 8-year-old grandson Sean. The family had been attacked in their home. They were preparing for dinner. Afterwards, Julie's body was mutilated, she was cleaned, and she was posed. So very much like the Gainsville murders. So it was a bit too much of a coincidence that they were so close in MO. That doesn't happen very often in the same time frame. Don Maines, an investigator on the case with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, travelled to Shreveport in November 1990. Because of the similarities between the murders committed in Gainesville and the murders committed in Shreveport, they included, as we said, posing the victims, tape residue on the victim's body, and vinegar used to clean the body. Maines said that they tested the bodily fluids from the perpetrator in Shreveport, so he didn't do a very good job of cleaning up after himself because they found DNA from it. And they found that this person also had type B blood. So he called the match to the evidence of Gainesville a revelation in the case. So at least they had a blood type for this person. So it doesn't pin it down a lot, but it helps a little bit at least. It's better than what they've had up to here, which is nothing.
They got DNA now.
Well, they've got blood type.
Yeah.
So it's enough at the moment to help. Shortly after Maine's trip to Shreveport, a resident of Shreveport, Cindy, I don't want to butcher her name, so I'll just call her Jurek, called Crime Stoppers. and she reported Danny Rowling was possibly connected to the murders. She'd heard a news report about a string of murders in the area. This report made her think about Danny, and the reason she thought this was because she actually met him at a Louisiana church, and she thought that he was linked to the Shreveport murders.
What made her think that, though?
So, Danny had said some really, really disturbing things to her and her then husband, Stephen Dobbin.
Right.
So he'd come over apparently every night for a little while. And then one night, Stephen, her then husband, came into the room and said, he's got to go. She said, well, why? What's he said? And she said, well, what's the problem? What's going on? And he said, he likes to stick knives into people. That's what Danny said to Stephen.
The husband.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this obviously made her think that he could be responsible for these, but she didn't want to believe this at this point, so she kind of held that under her hat for a little while. Danny also told her one day, I'm going to leave this town and I'm going to go where the girls are beautiful and I can just lay in the sun and watch beautiful women all day. News of the Gainesville murders haunted her, so she then finally contacted the police in November. Okay, so a bit fucking late, but she did at least contact them at this point. Danny continued to steal from homes and fuel stations after the murders that he'd committed until he was finally caught in Ocala after a high-speed chase in which he was wanted for the robbery of a Winn-Dixie. All right, so he was caught for a robbery. Nothing to do with the murders, purely for a robbery. The robbery he was arrested for had been committed 10 days after the body of Paul's and Taboda's bodies were found. Okay, so the two last victims.
Right.
Rowling was being held in the Marion County Jail just 40 miles away from Gainesville, so he was close. Investigators found that Rowling had, guess what type blood?
B.
Type B bloods. Yeah. Like the suspect in both the Gainesville and the Shreveport murders. So it's all kind of linking up at this point. Once Florida investigators realised that Rowling had multiple convictions for armed robbery, the robberies that we spoke about before, they realised he could have also been responsible for the bank robbery the same day that Krista Hoyt's body was found. They returned to the evidence locker where they found the gun, the screwdriver, the bag of money, and the cassette player that had been stored. They then listened to the tapes. All that evidence that was found at that campsite, They looked at all that evidence. They also found tools matching the marks left on the Gainesville murder scenes. The camp where he had been living was in a wooded area near apartment complexes frequented by the students as well. Later, it was discovered that on August the 5th, 1990, Rowling had broke into the home of Janet Frake in Sarasota, Florida, where he bought the K-bar knife and the gun.
Yeah.
He bound her, he gagged her with duct tape, and then he raped her. But he actually saved her life. He didn't kill her. So it was one person he did rape and he didn't kill her.
Right. How come?
It didn't say.
Right.
It just said that he didn't kill her. They gloss over a lot of those things. They gloss over a lot of his crimes. It's only really, they even glossed over the Grissom murders, and I'll tell you why at the end. You'll understand why. They mainly focus on the five main victims from Gainesville. In jail, Danny admitted to his crimes to his cellmate Bobby Lewis. And when it came to the interviews, he would only talk through Bobby. So they would sit in the interview room. He would tell Bobby, they'd ask him a question. Danny would give Bobby the answer, and then Bobby would repeat it to the officers.
Right, okay. Why did he do that?
Fuck knows. It's really weird. He just wanted to talk through Bobby.
Right, okay.
That's all he wanted to do. He didn't want to talk. He eventually did kind of open up at some point and then speak, because obviously there's only so much they're going to get out of him. But he did admit to Bobby Lewis in jail what he'd done.
Right.
And he kind of said, he did say, oh yeah, I made her give me a blowjob and I did this. He told her everything. He was shocked. He was like, I can't fucking believe this. Can't believe this person. I can't believe this guy's my cellmate. And I'm stuck with this guy that's a fucking psycho pretty much.
Yeah.
So I think he just wanted to get him out of where he was, which I can understand. In November of 1991, Danny Rowling was charged with 5 counts of murder, but 11 charges in all. So there was other charges that he'd obviously got. It wasn't just murder. So it was like abuse of a corpse and stuff like that kind of thing, for obviously the decapitation and stuff. Rowling was brought to trial nearly 4 years after the murders. It took 4 years. He claimed his motive was to become a superstar, in quotes, similar to Ted Bundy. In 1994, before his trial could even get underway, Rowling unexpectedly pleaded guilty to all of his charges. He said it was to save all the crime scene photos in the court, so they were all going to be blasted out and shown to everyone. And he said he wanted to save the families, but they were still shown their evidence. They still have to be shown. He wouldn't get away with kind of people not seeing how barbaric of an animal he actually was. In the trial and everything, he was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, and paraphilia. Claudia, Danny's mum, testified that she sought to get Danny psychological care several times over the years when he was younger, but couldn't because her husband thought nothing was wrong with him. So she did try and get him help, but James was just like, nope, nothing wrong with him. There was so much evidence stacked up against Danny, along with the guilty admission. It didn't take long for the court to come to the decision that he was guilty of all 11 charges, with aggravating factors. So aggravating factors basically mean, if you're not sure about what aggravating factors are, so it'll be like if you're, for example, committing a murder and you rape someone in the process of that murder, that's an aggravating factor. Right. So what they did was they used all the aggravating factors from these 5 murders, plus they used all the aggravating factors from all of his previous robberies. So they used all of his previous 15 years of like convictions and stuff. They used all of that as aggravating factors to make it basically felonies, pretty much. The reason I'm making this clear is that that's the reason the death penalty was on the table. So the death penalty is always on the table when there is aggravating factors. There's a massive list. You can look up what the aggravating factors are, but a lot of them is like when you commit rape during a crime or anything like that. On April the 20th, 1994, Danny Rowling was sentenced to death. But he wasn't done. He decided to sing to his then girlfriend, Sandra London, at sentencing. When asked if he had anything to say, he was asked to stop by the judge, and he refused. He carried on singing. You can find him singing. It's so fucking cringeworthy. Like, he's singing. I mean, he's got an alright voice, to be fair. But it's so fucking cringeworthy. And she stood there, like, lapping it up. Like, oh yeah. Oh, this is so sexy. My man singing to me in court while he's convicted of 11 charges and 5 murders.
And sentenced to death.
And sentenced to death. And she's literally there, like, you can see her on the court TV footage, like, smiling, smitten with him.
Maybe she's a crazy nut like he was.
So true crime buffs will know who Sandra London is. She's a fucked up individual, this woman is.
Fuck says it all then, doesn't it?
Yeah, if you can Google Sandra London and you can see just how much of a truly fucked up human being she is.
Just out of curiosity, did he ever find his wallet? The one that he reported?
No.
That's
Trust you to focus on the tiniest
all I was
thing.
thinking about. I thought you were just going to throw that in there and be like, yeah, they found his wallet at the crime scene, under the bed, and things like that. That's all I thought about for the last 20 minutes.
No, that's all. Yeah.
She's going to say that in a second. She's going to go, yeah, he found his wallet because he fucking left it there. Do you know what I mean? He fell out when he was raping one of the girls.
No, he didn't. No, the wallet was never found.
Right, okay. No. Well, I just ruined my fucking...
Yeah, I know. Sorry to ruin the last 20 minutes of you thinking about that. Shortly before he was executed in Florida for the series of killings in Gainesville, Rowling claimed responsibility for the Shreveport murders, so the Grissom family murders. He handed his spiritual advisor, Reverend Mike Hudspeth, and Florida police a handwritten confession and apology. In a written statement made shortly before his execution, Danny confessed to the murders of the Grissom family in Shreveport. His last meal was lobster tail, and at his execution, the 52-year-old sang again a hymn-type song that rambled on for 5 verses. But he made no other statements, no other apologies, nothing. He just sang like a fucking canary. Danny was executed by lethal injection at Florida State Prison on October the 25th, 2006, after the US Supreme Court rejected a last-ditch appeal. He was pronounced dead at 6:13 p.m. 47 people witnessed his execution, which was double the capacity, actually, of the viewing room. They wanted to see this evil, sadistic fucker die, and I can't really say I blame them.
Yeah, fair enough.
So, like I said in the beginning, what movie do you think this is based on?
I have no idea.
No? When I
not,
say it, you'll be like,
have I not
oh,
seen
yeah,
it?
you've seen it. Well, I don't know if you've seen all of it. You've
Look,
seen me watch it a few times.
It's like the whole Terminal film again, where I had watched the other day. Yeah, I didn't even know about this fella until you said it. It's like, right, I'm gonna go and watch the movie.
We're talking about the guy that recently died that lived in the thing, and Terminal, the Tom Hanks film, was based on. That's the film we're talking about.
Yeah.
And Atty, who is obsessed with movies, has never seen this fucking movie. And that same day, he was like, nah, that's it. I'm watching this movie. And I caught him watching it. And he's like, this is a really good movie.
Yes, because it was 2004. I didn't think it was that late old movie.
Yeah.
And when I watched it, because I do like Tom Hanks, and it was actually a really good film. There was some touching bits. I felt sorry for him. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh my God. You know, but yeah, anyway.
Yeah, it's okay. So when I tell you, you'll be like, fucking hell yeah, that makes complete sense. So the Gainesville Ripper murders actually inspired screenwriter Kevin Williamson to write the script for a, in quotes, small, unknown 1996 classic slasher movie called Scream. By Wes Craven.
I don't watch them films.
No, but you've seen me watch them loads because I have them on like while I'm doing shit around the house.
All I see is a man running around in masks, like stabbing people up, going
stabbing girls, and yeah.
Well, it's not just girls though, is it?
Mostly women.
Oh, is it?
There's men as well. Yeah, it's kind of moved on since then. And these were actually directed by Wes Craven, if you don't already know. He also directed cult classics like Screams 1 to 4. So he did Screams 1 to 4. The Nightmare of Elm Street, The Last House on the Left, The Hills Have Eyes, and Vampire in Brooklyn, which is one of our favourite movies.
That's a classic.
It's a fucking brilliant movie, isn't it?
Very old film.
Very old, but it's still amazing.
Cheesy if you watch it now,
great,
by the way, but it was a very classic back in the day.
The Scream series of films is actually still ongoing to this day. I know because we've spoke about this. I went to the cinema and watched the recent one. And unfortunately, though, if you don't know, Wes Craven died in 2015. But others did carry on the torch with the recent movie in January 2022. So yeah, the Gainesville Ripper was loosely based on
right. Okay.
That. Yeah, mad, isn't it?
There was no raping in Scream, though, was there? He didn't rape
no.
them.
No, he didn't. No, he didn't.
The stabbing, yes, but the raping.
Yeah, no. Again, loosely based on that. So yeah, that was where the movie actually came from. That's where the screenwriter actually got the idea for Scream, was from Danny Rowling's The Gainesville Ripper.
Right.
So he's one of the most well known, one of them, along with like Ted Bundy and all them lot. I would say he's quite a well known killer. I mean, I don't really, if you'd really class him as a serial killer or a spree killer. I mean, you could probably class him as a spree killer, but then the Grissom murders kind of take away from that a little bit because they were previously. But he obviously couldn't be convicted of the Grissom murders because he was already executed. He was already being executed that day. So nothing happened from that. So I kind of feel bad for their family that they never got that official closure of a guilty verdict for him. But
well, he's dead now.
At least he admitted it. At least it's not unsolved. So at least he admitted it all.
Yeah, family can rest easy now, and their murders been killed. You know, like
he's been executed. Yeah, he at least got his comeuppance.
That's it. Justice has been served, as they say, innit?
Yeah. You know what I mean? So what did you think of that one, babe?
I don't understand why you chopped off the nipples.
He was asked at one point, like, why were you so barbaric? And he just said, I enjoy inflicting pain.
Right. But they're already dead, though. So, why did he...
He was just fucking barbaric. He was just, again, frontal lobe damage. I'm going to put it down to frontal lobe damage, abuse as a child. You know, if you're growing up in that situation, he obviously had massive psychological issues, clearly stemming from a child. If it boils down to, are these people created, or are they, you know, he was fucking 100% created. 100% created. The abuse he suffered for the whole upbringing, he was made the way he was. If he grew up in a different household, would he have become that same person?
Well, you don't know.
He might not
because
have.
we read some people have a very good upbringing and they turn to like. So just to bring up that, the upbringing probably didn't help the
Yeah.
scenario and all that, but he chose to do what he chose to do all them things.
Yeah.
You know what I don't understand. Like I said, if he wanted to do pain, why didn't he cause pain while they were still alive? Why did he, like I said,
Yeah.
do the nipple thing, do all that? You know, while they were dead.
Yeah.
So because they couldn't feel no pain, they were dead.
But then,
there's no.
then we don't know if they were actually dead when
Right.
he did those things. I
Yeah.
mean, he loved to watch them die. He made a point
I
saying
can
that he loved to
understand a
watch
little
them
bit
die.
more if he like did all them things, why they were dying or why they were still alive.
I think they were dying.
To conflict, sorry, as much
Yeah.
pain as he could to
Yeah.
them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but
I mean, I think it boils down to, are killers, are these people created or are they born that way? I personally think you cannot give one point. I think that it differs depending on the person, and I think you can come to that decision. Some people are made and some people are born like that. They can grow up in amazing households and become fucking serial killers or rapists.
What does it take for you to snap like that, though? Do you know what I mean?
I don't
What goes
know.
through your mind to be an average Joe one day and then the
Yeah.
next day?
I don't think we'll ever understand because we're not that way. I think you have to be wired up really wrong or wired up like that to even be able to
Yeah, but you don't know.
think like
But you
that. I
don't know what's
think.
going on. Like you said, he had a bit of a rough, very,
Oh, he had a
very
terrible upbringing. Yeah, I'm not going to say he didn't because he
upbringing.
did.
You know, and then being kicked out of, obviously not getting rejected from the Navy, then getting kicked out of the RAF. You know,
Oh, well, yeah.
it's just maybe one thing after another. Just
Mm.
and everyone has that breaking point, as we all know. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying everyone's gonna have that breaking point where they're gonna go wrong. I'm gonna go kill everyone, rape certain people. Do you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
we all have that breaking point where we either snap at work or in our social life and things
Yeah.
like that. I'm not justifying it, by the way. But yeah, what does it take? What does it take for a person to snap like and go, you know? Oh, but why
I
did he
dunno.
go? Why did he just rape these women? He's not like did what was with the women?
I don't know.
You know,
I don't know. I think
was it just any? By the sound of it, was it just random women that he saw and goes, right? I'm just gonna
yeah.
do.
So I said he was married.
Yeah.
From what I saw, I didn't bother putting it in it because it's not really that relevant. So his wife, that lady he was married to, that child,
Yeah.
a lot of the women resembled her.
Right. Okay.
A lot of them, and I can't remember the lady's name, but the one that he decapitated.
Yes.
She resembled heavily to her. And they think that that's why she was so brutalized, because she looked a hell of a lot like his ex-wife.
So what did he do? Obviously, he had some thing against his ex-missus.
Yeah.
Still pissed off because obviously
Yeah,
she left him.
yeah.
Divorced him and left him.
Yeah.
And that's why she did it, because obviously she can't do it to her.
Yeah.
'Cause she's not in the scene.
Other people said that if she'd have stayed with him, if she hadn't have divorced him, she would have probably been the first victim, because he threatened to kill her.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Maybe she was going to be the first victim and the only victim.
Yeah, she might be. Yeah.
She stayed with him, like you said.
You just don't know, do you?
No, you don't. Again, you don't know what goes on fucking through people's minds. You know what I mean?
No.
Fucking people just snap, don't they? You know?
Yeah. I mean, we see it time and time again. People snapping and them doing things, and it's just, yeah, you just don't know. You don't know what you're going to be like. How much does it take for someone to snap? Well, I don't think we'll ever know. And I hope I never find out, and I hope you never find out.
No.
I hope you never snap on me to the point where you kill me.
Chop off your nipples.
Yeah, it's an inside joke, guys. All right. So that's today's case. I can't really say hope you enjoyed it, but hope that case interested you in some kind of way, and now you know where Scream was based on. If you've seen that movie,
Scream.
It was loosely based on
Right,
that. Yeah. So along with the whole Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Silence of the Lambs, all those things, they were based on real serial killers. So we'll eventually cover those one day. I know I spoke to my sister Pippa about this, about who's based on who, because she loves all that sort of shit. But yeah, thank you guys for listening for this week. Hope you all have a lovely, lovely weekend, and hopefully try and stay warm. It's got really fucking cold now. We've literally even put the heating on, haven't we, babe?
For half an hour.
For half an hour.
The prices of gas electric's gone up.
Yeah. So yeah, hope you all have a lovely, lovely weekend. Thank you for tuning in this week, and we will catch you guys next Sunday. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.